Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Susan Lopresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul, the podcast where we explore the highs, the lows, and everything in between when it comes to a woman's life, her health, and all aspects of navigating the midlife landscape. I'm your host, Susan Lopresti, and today I'm super excited about my guest that I have. Her name is Rita Desnoyers Garcia. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Rita because I absolutely love what she's doing. And I wish she was around or I knew her 30 years ago when I was struggling with what she's helping women to do today. So Rita has been helping women reach their true potential for over 30 years. After a long career as a social worker in New York City, while raising her family, she had a spiritual transformation. She is now a spiritual teacher, speaker, life coach for stressed out professional moms, as well as a comedian, a musician, and the author of 3 books, Extraordinary Abundance, Outside of the Box Love Experiments, and the Self-Compassion Project, and the creator of the Forest Meditations. Rita, thank you so much for being here with me today. One of the first questions I want to ask you is tell me about your spiritual transformation. What was that all about?
I just want to say first, thank you so much for this opportunity, Susan. I really enjoyed speaking with you in the past, and I'm excited to do this conversation today. So thank you for this opportunity to share.
Thank you for coming.
Oh, of course. So my spiritual transformation, spiritual transformations kind of have stops and starts, if you will, like across. I feel like I've had little transformations along my life, but the big one that started me on this work was when I was a mom of 3 young children. So I had 3 children, 4 and under. So I basically had like a little preschool in my house. And I wasn't busy enough, apparently. So I decided to start a health and wellness business on the phone. I was selling health and wellness products that I really loved. And I was trying to figure out how to market them on the phone. And I was taking a course. I was literally nursing my youngest while I was taking classes. And sometimes I'd had a toddler on my knee while I was on the phone. And it was right at the time where online marketing was a kind of a new thing.
Yes.
So if you can imagine that time, we weren't constantly on the computer all the time.
What year was that around?
2000, 2008, 2009.
Oh, okay.
Where it was like people weren't online as much as they are today.
Yes.
And so I was doing this business and I thought I was having a good time with it. I really had dreams of retiring my husband because he worked really long hours and I wanted him to be around more. And I thought, yeah, if I could make $1 million and retire my husband, this would be great. So that was the idea I had in my mind. And I was sticking to it. And I was not having a good time. I didn't know I wasn't having a good time. I just knew that things were happening to my body. Like I developed a cough. When you're selling health and wellness products, the last thing you want to have is a cough because it doesn't really, give a lot of confidence to the person on the other end of the phone that the health and wellness is, if you don't have it, right? So that happened. I remember I pulled a muscle in my tongue at one point. Like my body was like, stop, what are you doing? This is not for you. And I was just like going. And my husband would even ask me, are you having fun with this? And I'd be like, oh, I'm having a ball. But I wasn't. And one day I was on a conference call with some other people who were doing the same thing, and they were providing me with a lead list. And they said to the team, guys, if you don't start closing people, we're going to have to take these leads away. Like we can't give you leads that you're not using correctly. And I remember muting the phone and I started crying. And because I thought, oh my God, my dream is slipping away. I don't know if I can really do this. I'm a failure. And then all of this failure stuff came into the forefront. Like I couldn't bat it away anymore. That belief, you're not good enough, you're a failure. And then of course I started seeing my kids crying because I didn't have a babysitter. So they were like crying because I'm crying. We all cried that afternoon. Right? And I literally hit bottom. Like I was sitting on the floor crying, sobbing, feeling like a horrible, horrible person, right? And a failure. I think every woman has had those moments where they just feel like, right? Yeah. You're a failure. You're a screw up. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast, but
go right ahead.
Like it's a shit show and I fucked up, basically.
Yeah.
Right? And thank God that happened. That's all I have to say. I'm so grateful for that moment, even though it sucked and it felt horrible. What happened in that moment after I stopped crying was I realized I really needed help. And my help came in the form of a beautiful man named Chris Saris, who was a protege coach of this guy, Ray Dodd, who does all belief work. And he is a protege of Don Miguel Ruiz. I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
He wrote the Four Agreements. Yeah. So in that lineage.
Oh.
And the spiritual transformation really happened when I had my first phone call with him. It was sort of like a consultation phone call, right? And I had to like cancel the first one because I screwed up. Like it was classic, like totally overwhelmed, stressed out mom, right? So he finally got me on the phone. I finally was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. And he asked me a question, which really was the big eye opener for me, which was, right now, Rita, can you just have some kindness and some gentleness with yourself? Can you be kind and gentle with yourself at this moment? And I thought, what? Really? Yeah. What's the point of that? Where's that going to get me? Right. It was like a brand new concept. Now, I am sure, just to give people credit where credit's due, I'm sure people had suggested that to me before. But timing is everything. And yes. I probably just dismissed it like you're a kook, whatever. But at that moment, I was vulnerable and desperate enough to take in this information, which I think is some of the best times to get help is when you're desperate enough to be open to different kinds of things. Yes. And so I was like, all right, dude, I'll do it. And I went into this space within myself where I was just giving myself kindness and gentleness. And of course, I started sobbing. Why? Because it was such a relief to stop beating myself up, that I could just for that 30 seconds or a minute, just feel gentle kindness with myself. And that for me was a huge transformation. I was just like, this is important. Pay attention. Who knew this was going to happen today? It's like one of those days, like, I didn't know we were going here today.
Right.
And I felt this sense of peace. I was no longer a terrible person or a terrible mom or a terrible wife or a terrible businesswoman. I was just being kind and gentle with myself as a human being. And I thought, wow, I got to hire this guy. He's got some good stuff going on here. This is good. And in that moment, I realized that was significant. I need to pay attention to it. And that really was the seed that grew into what I do now, which is all about self-compassion. It always starts with self-compassion with every client that I work with and myself. It's always the starting point, because if you don't have self-compassion, you have no room to make change. You have no room to just be kind and gentle with yourself so that you can see there's bigger things out there, or opportunities or gifts or abilities and capabilities that you didn't even know you had, or messages, right? It's sort of like when you feel sick and you kind of get scared and you decide to make an appointment either with a health practitioner or a doctor or something. And then by the time you get to the appointment, usually you feel a little better. Right? Have you ever had that experience where you're just
toothache, having a toothache and going to the dentist and it's not there?
And you're like, what? That's what self-compassion is. It's a way to shift. It's a shifting of energy from the criticism and what I call emotional dogpiling on yourself and the guilt and all that stuff into, okay, there's hope. There's an opening here. There's a possibility here. And sometimes that's all you need to feel better, like
Yes.
go forward. Or sometimes the situation actually just works itself out because you've done that. So I realized that was a big part of my transformation, was discovering through that question how powerful self-compassion is and why it's not like a luxury item that women need. It's like, this is your foundation. This is not like an add-on. This is where you start. Everything good comes from that. Does that make sense?
Yes. And like I said, where were you when I needed you 30 years ago? Because I was working in corporate America when I had my daughter. And like you, I was introduced to a company with wellness products, and I thought that I was going to, like you, be able to quit my corporate job, stay home. I was going to make so much money because everyone was telling me how much money they were making. And I had this big dream, and I worked it for a couple of years. And I would enroll 2 people, 3 would drop out. It was always that. And I was always behind. And I'm still a customer of that company. I still use their products.
Yeah, me
But
too.
I, at one point, said, it's just not working for me. I don't have what it takes to be that successful person. I don't know what they have that I didn't have, but I just couldn't make it work. And I was depressed for a while because I had to let go of that dream.
Yeah.
And, through my whole entire career as being a working mom, I was never compassionate to myself. Never. I was always beating myself up.
Yeah.
I'm not a good mom because I'm out of the house 12 hours a day, and the guilt. And so your work is so needed. And that's why when we first connected, I was like, I need to have you on my podcast because your message is so valuable. Now, who's your client and what is it that you help them to achieve?
Sure. Yeah. Right. Because it's like, fine to just say self-compassion. It's like, okay, how does that concretize that for me?
Right.
So my ideal client is somewhere between 35 and 55. She's got some children. Sometimes they're grown children. Sometimes they're grown and at home, or they're launched, or so the age of the children is not as, I have a whole variety on that. But the issues are usually the same. Trying to control everything, trying to please everyone, sometimes feeling like there are always hidden dangers that they have to guard against, sometimes feeling like the world is against them. A lot of them are very high achieving. So they've used this, the droning on of be hard on yourself, criticize yourself, as their way to achieve, but the achievements are never enough, right? It's like a momentary, like, I made it, but I got to do this now. So there's never that inner satisfaction. So there's 2 things going on. There's, you never get there. So it's always, I'll be happy when. And then it's the using of all this self-criticism, beating yourself up, or feeling fearful and that everything is dangerous, that you think is going to protect you. Right. And really what I learned was all of that's kind of BS. Like, yeah, it gives you, it's like a bad boyfriend, if you will. Like, yeah, he gives you this and that, but overall there's more bad than good. He doesn't really come through. And I love men, just by the way. This is not a dig on men. It's just like an analogy that a lot of women can, it's like your contractor who says, yeah, we can do that. And then he doesn't show up for 3 weeks, right? It's like, it's not a strategy that works. Maybe it worked in your childhood. Maybe it got you through your childhood, but time to upgrade your strategies. And that's when I bring in the self-compassion. Like, what if instead of like beating yourself up about being a terrible parent, you were actually having compassion for yourself and then saw what opportunities arise when you actually feel good about yourself and you love yourself? How would that affect your parenting? Probably make you a better parent. Although all these sabotaging strategies would tell you things like, and I said it to myself, well, if I'm so like loving to myself, I'm going to end up on the couch with bonbons and curlers in my hair. My kids are going to be running around with BB guns. Like, it's going to be horrendous. Right.
Yeah.
My coach would challenge me and say, well, have you been loving to yourself lately? Do you really know that for a fact? Why don't you try it out? And he would challenge me, and then I would do it. And I go, oh my gosh, I'm not just sitting around watching Oprah eating bonbons all day. I'm actually having fun with my kids, or I'm actually appreciating them, or I'm actually having more compassion for them. And then I can connect with them better. I'm feeling better about myself. So I'm not looking for all the nitpicky stuff, right? Like a lot of the stuff, they say, don't sweat the small stuff, and it's all small stuff. You start to see it is all small stuff, right? But all those saboteuring old strategies will tell you this is really important and you have to do something about it, and the world's going to end. And so you're always in that stressed, hyper state of being. So I help, to answer your question, what I really help professional moms do is to calm their system so that they can see they can make better decisions. They have more capabilities than they thought, and they have more resources. Because that's another thing that happens when you are not very compassionate with yourself and you're super stressed out. You don't even realize you have resources. You think you're the only one, or your resources suck.
What kind of resources?
Like maybe there's a neighbor that could watch your kids for an hour. Some of the resources are going to cost money, some are not. Right. Or maybe there's a way you can reconfigure your schedule so that you're not doing the most stressful things when you're at your worst. That's an inner resource. The knowledge that you can actually create a schedule where your energy level and what you're doing are matched, so that you're not setting yourself up for frustration, right, or for over busyness. Or another resource is, how about, a friend or a mate or someone who owes you something can fix that, or reach that, or move that, or take your kids somewhere.
Right.
Or take that shift. A lot of stressed out women don't rely on other people because they've been burned. And so they become like, it's just me against the world, versus I have all these resources at my availability, but I have to trust a little bit. And if you're a perfectionist, this is a big one, they may do it different than you, and that's okay.
Right. I could only put myself in those shoes because I remember it so well. I was always so focused on everything that I couldn't do. I can't take my daughter to the park. I can't be there for events at school, and I had to pick and choose. And I never gave myself the opportunity to think about, well, what can I do? Because I was always so focused on everything that I wasn't able to do. Yes. And I focused on all of that. And it just always made me feel bad about myself, like I'm a terrible mom. And back in 1993, back then in corporate America, there weren't many working women that had children. A lot of women gave birth and said they were coming back to work, but they never did. Yep. So I didn't have a camaraderie of women at work that we could commiserate and talk and share stories and frustrations. I was like an outcast because I was a working mom. And a lot of times, if I had to go to a school meeting, I would, let's say, go to work late, but I would walk into the auditorium to the meeting, and I was dressed as a corporate executive. And the moms there were like looking, oh, she's a working mom. I never was able to connect. Like there was this segregation. Yes. Almost, I don't know if they looked down on me or it was my perception of them because of my guilt, I guess. But I never had compassion for myself about any of it. Yeah. And if you're always in the negative, you can't possibly see the positive sides or what you can do. So
Yes.
that's why I feel like your work is so needed. It really is, because as I was continuing on my career and my daughter was getting older and less reliant on me, now there were women coming into the company who were working moms. And I saw how stressed out they were. And we could talk about it. And sometimes I'd say, yeah, it flies by. Like, you'll see it's going to get easier and things like that. But I never had anyone that was telling me that. I was like the pioneer
I was
of,
just going to say you're the pioneer. Yeah. Which
yeah,
is, kind of sucks for you, but you can turn it into the gift that you share with other moms, which is, yeah, I know, I was there.
yes.
I know what that's like.
Yes. So I was a friend to a lot of these working moms, and they would come to me for advice like, I don't know what to do. My son has a very important meeting I need to go to. And I would tell them all the time, do what you have, because I used to struggle. Should I go? No, they're going to get mad at me at work. And
Right.
no, because at the end of the day, go to the meeting, go make time for your kids. Yeah, so that's why I said, where were you when I needed you back
It
then?
was a different time, I would say maybe it just had to be the way it was for you.
Yes. It
Sometimes,
was tough.
yeah.
But you know what, Rita? At the end of the day, I always felt like I wasn't there for my daughter, but she's
Mm.
30 years old now. We are so tight. And not only that, I think that her growing up, watching me juggle so many different things and having a strong work ethic, because I had a very strong work ethic, plus I had a very strong family ethic. Like, she and my husband at the time, that they were my world and my work. So I had those two worlds, and I was always trying to juggle both of them. But I think it gave her some kind of strong foundation, because she also has a very strong work ethic. And so I think at the end of the day, she looked up to me for everything that I was able to juggle and be successful at, even though at the time I never thought I was a successful mom, because I always felt like, look at all the other moms. They could take their kids to all these programs. I couldn't. I had no time for that. Plus the fact I didn't have any money to pay people to do it for me, which
Yeah.
was also like another feeling of lack of worth on my part.
Yeah. Now, but when you look back on all that, do you go, wow, I got through that. I raised my kids and I worked and you were doing 2.5 jobs for years.
Yes. Well, when I look back on it now, I think about all of the wasted energy that I, focused on all of the negative aspects. And it was a lot of wasted energy and a lot of being down on myself and feeling bad about myself. And my daughter struggled in school a little bit. She wasn't so great in math, and I had to hire a tutor to help her. And I would feel like, well, if I had more time, I could sit and help her. So I was always down on myself.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, looking back, I think that I was an excellent example for my daughter to say, look how strong my mom is. She's able to work and have a job and be successful there. And she raised me, and we have a wonderful relationship. So clearly I did something right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so that's the harvest time, is to have that
Yes.
relationship and to be able to share those struggles and normalize that sometimes life is going to give you really hard choices and you do the best you can. And you have a PhD in in beating yourself up, right?
Yes.
So you can say, look, I'm an expert in that. Doesn't work very well. So take it from me. You want a PhD in something else. Maybe it's in loving yourself or honoring yourself or saying this may be the wrong decision. I'll know soon and I can change my mind. Or what's the gift and opportunity in this problem?
Right. But that's why I felt like when we met and you told me what you do, I was like, I really need to have you on this podcast because I'm sure there's women that are listening right now that are struggling with this exact thing because I don't think it changes. I worked there for 27 years and I worked with women who were juggling a career and had 3 children and they were all in different stages of life. And I would sit back and say, I thought I had it rough. Look at them, because 1 is a lot easier than 3, right? Because
yeah, I mean, 1 is a game changer. 3 is, yes, I definitely felt like it changed. The game went to the next level because you're not doing man on man anymore. You're doing zone. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you have 3 kids and they all have different needs and different wants. And now you're juggling even more, plus trying to hold down a job and be a good wife on top of it.
Yep.
Right? Can't forget about the husband.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the reasons I do what I do, because there's so many spinning plates. And when you're feeling terrible about yourself, you're always worried about one plate falling, because then that would confirm your most fearful thought about yourself, which is that you're not enough, or you're not lovable, or you're not deserving, or you're a failure. So yeah, it's amazing what we do when we feel so poorly about ourselves.
It's also amazing because as women, we're always the nurturers and we're always caring for someone. For example, my daughter, my mom now, because aging parents, right? So now you have your parents, you need to take care of them. And like I said, your spouse, and you leave no room in your life to take care of yourself and do the things that make you happy. What brings you joy? Oh, I don't have time for any of that. I have to come home. I have to help my children. I have to cook. I have to clean my house. You leave no time for yourself. And I think the message really is what they say when you're on an airplane. And if there's an emergency, take the oxygen for yourself first before you give it to your children. We don't follow that. And women need to start taking care of themselves first.
Yes.
So that then they could take care of everyone else without resentment, because at times you start resenting the people that you're taking care of.
Of course.
They're depleting you of everything that you have, and you have nothing left for yourself. So I really feel like that's the important message here.
Absolutely. And guess what? That affects your health.
Yes.
It affects your capacity, your energy, your physical health. Diseases, your immunity is all affected by these emotions when they are constantly pumping, all those chemicals pumping through you all the time. Your body has to react to that. That's what it does. So yeah, it's not like I said before, it's not a luxury item. It's not an add-on. It's foundational.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up about health, because I was always sick back then.
Yep.
I was always sick. I would get stomach viruses all the time. I would get the flu all the time, and I used to take the flu shot. Now I don't take the flu shot, and I never get the flu. I used to get vertigo a lot, migraine headaches as well, because the stress that I was under. Commuting into Manhattan on the Long Island Railroad, the train would break down. I was late for work. Now I'm worried. My boss is going to be mad. I'm coming in at 10 o'clock. The stress was unbelievable, and I was always sick. Cold, sore throat.
Yeah. Yeah, your immunity gets really affected by all those things. And I had a lot of the same, and I was at home working, but at home, and I got sick all the time. And guess what, Susan? It was not just stress. It was a belief. And the belief was the only way that I can take a rest is if I'm sick.
Maybe I believed that subconsciously and didn't know it.
I didn't realize it till I was with my coach, and I said, I kind of slipped out of my mouth like a Freudian slip. It was sort of like, well, at least I can get some rest. This is sometimes is the only way I can get rest. And he went, whoa, 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 what? And I said, yeah, when I'm sick, it's legit. It's legit. You can get rest when you're sick. Right. And he said, Rita, do you realize what you're saying right now? What you're saying is, I have to get sick in order to rest. Do you think maybe you're getting sick a lot because you need to rest, but you've made this condition on yourself that it only happens when you're sick? And I was like, oh, I never thought of that before. Right. That was just reality. It's only legitimate when you're sick. He's like, you better start resting when you're not sick so that you don't have to become sick to rest.
Wow. And it's probably like a subconscious.
Yes, very subconscious. It came out of my mouth at that moment.
Right.
But it wasn't something like I said out loud all the time.
Right.
Or paid attention to. We really actually do say our beliefs all the time.
Right.
If you ever find yourself talking to someone else, I've noticed it, especially with other people. They would tell me a story and I'd be like, belief, 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 belief. I wouldn't say that to them, but I'd be thinking, wow, they have some major beliefs about stuff, about how life works, who they are, who their relationships are, what that all means, how much money's possible, what's possible for them, the relationship with their kids. It's like on display when you see it. It's like when you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. And then you realize, I do that too.
Yes.
These are all just beliefs. They're not reality.
Right.
That's a big part also of the work I do is, let's look at these beliefs that you're holding on to and see if we can revise them, because they're not helping you right now.
So you take on a client like that. What's one of the first things that you get them started on to start changing their beliefs?
So one of the first things I do, like a discovery call, right? Where you're kind of assessing where they're at, what they want to work on, what's the most important for them to work on. So it's sometimes establishing what's the problem, why are you coming here? What do you want to resolve? And then we look at that, and usually sort of like an overarching treatment or prescription would be to start writing things down, like a journal, start getting them out and onto paper. Let's work at some sort of ritual that you can do for yourself so you can take care of yourself. Because a lot of the women that I work with never do anything for themselves. Just like you said, they never put that oxygen mask on. So we start doing little things that they can add, like little micro atomic habits, if you will, that James Clear book, Atomic Habits, just little habits they can do. And then we start chipping away at the problem. Like, what's the problem under the problem? Because usually it's not just, my kid won't clean up his room. It makes me angry. Like, all right, what's underneath that? Right? Because it's not the messy room.
Right.
Stuff underneath that. What it says about your kid respecting you, or what it says about your parenting, or what it says about how people will look at you, or whatever it is. We try to get to those core beliefs about ourselves pretty quickly. And I have like different ways of doing that are very simple. Just like keep asking, what's the meaning behind this? What's the meaning behind that? What's the meaning behind? You hit bottom at some point, and it's usually, I'm not enough. I'm a failure. I don't deserve this. I'm unlovable. I will be abandoned. Usually somewhere in that vicinity. And then I start just asking them to notice where they see that in their lives. Like, oh, that's more of I'm not enough. Oh, that's more of I'm not enough. So just noticing. It's sort of like when you start a new nutritional program, it's not just necessarily changing everything in your diet. It's let's look at what you're actually eating.
Yes.
What are you actually eating? And how does it really taste?
Right.
And then you slowly start making adjustments. Because if you just change everything overnight, it's not going to work very well. And then the person gets discouraged, and then they this doesn't work. And then before you know it, they're not calling you back and nothing's going anywhere.
Right.
So it's little changes over time. But if you can start noticing is a lot. Because when you start noticing, like, I can't get rest unless I'm sick, that's a huge revelation. Holy
Yes.
crow. I'm leading my life in that way where I set myself to get sick all the time just so I can rest. So it's noticing the emotions, noticing the beliefs that support the emotions. And then we do different strategies. There's lots of different strategies of emotional release. I'm doing a free workshop next week where I'm showing them like a 3-step process about what to do when you're really stressed and you're about to yell at your kids, or you are yelling at your kids, or you're yelling at yourself, like how to redirect that into an opportunity to connect with yourself more. So it's usually we have a conversation about what they really want, why they really want it. Like, why is it important to them? Because it's going to take some work to get there. And if we don't even know why we want to change, we're much more likely to quit.
Rita, for anyone who's on here listening, who's interested in that workshop, how would they sign up for that?
Well, I could give you a link, but it's basically on my site, becomingawake.com, under events. So if you hit events, it'll bring you down, and it's just called 3 Simple Steps for less yelling and more fun with your family.
Okay.
It's from 1 to 2 Eastern, just on Zoom like this.
Right.
And I'm going to go over these. We're going to do the exercise together, and then we come up with a way that you can integrate it into your life. And then, of course, I talk about other things they can do with me if they want to.
Okay.
But the main chunk is this process, which I've used from, pretty much the beginning of working with my coach. And it's kind of the fundamentals of my book, The Self-Compassion Project. So I found it helps so much because it gets you out of what the outside is doing and it makes you go internally. That's where you have your power.
Right.
You can't control the outside, but you can do a lot on the inside.
Yes. Back then, I had no clue about any of this. And honestly, maybe I just didn't know where to look for help or even realize that there was help out there because I was always down. I was depressed. I always felt sad. I would walk to the train station in the morning, the tears were rolling down my eyes. I was sleep deprived. I was just down on myself from every which way. And I think that your work is just so important, and it really would make a woman's life so much easier to realize that there's a whole different way of viewing this whole entire process.
Absolutely.
And I had none of those tools at the time.
You didn't. I remember there was a movie, I think it was in the 90s, Broadcast News. Remember that movie, Broadcast News, with Holly Hunter, John Hurt? There's this one scene. So she's a news producer, high-powered, high-achieving woman, news producer. And one of the scenes is every day she takes 10 minutes and she just sobs. She just sobs. And then she cleans herself up and she goes to work. And I'm like, what the heck is that? That you're in this situation that's so stressful, that you're so disconnected from yourself, that you give yourself like a little time. That's good. A little time to have your emotions, but that's it. Then you're cut off from all of it. And that's not how we work as human beings.
No.
But that was the 90s, right? The 80s and 90s. The 80s were the big, you had to be big, broad shoulders, right? It was when women were still trying to think, we're still in the mindset of, in order to be successful, I have to be like a man.
Yes. And it was a man's world back then.
Yes. And maybe that was the right attitude to have at that time. Maybe that's perfect. It got you through that. But just like your childhood strategies, I call them old pajamas. They were great when you were little. They were nice and fluffy and you loved them, but you can't even get them over your foot now. So they're not very functional. They're not functioning very well. You kind of come up with new strategies. And I think this age also, this era that we're going through as a planetary shifting made this more available. There weren't a lot of coaches.
No.
Coaching is something relatively new.
Yes. Oh, well, in the 90s, I didn't even know that there were life coaches.
I didn't know either.
Yeah. I would never think to even look for one or anything. Like I had no clue. I thought I was just alone in my world because, like I said, there were all these stay-at-home moms at school that were picking up their children, and I felt like an outcast because I couldn't even take my daughter to school in the morning because I had to be on a train at 7:35. So I had a woman who used to walk my daughter to school every day and pick her up after school. I couldn't even do that, which, all of it. I just felt bad about myself. And then, of course, that transitioned over to my husband at the time because I always felt like, well, if he was making more money, I would be able to stay at home. So now I was resenting him as well because, he couldn't provide and he needed me to help keep a roof over our head.
Yeah.
And then that started a whole different, that's a topic for another day, for sure. Right. But so I always was making him feel bad because he would see how stressed out I was, how I was always, down and crying and the tears and the meltdowns. And so it was really difficult.
Yeah, it sounds. And the other thing I just want to bring into this equation is that as much as you felt like you were the outsider and maybe the other moms were looking at you sideways, I'm sure there were moms in that crowd that went in their own head, wow, she works. I want to work. I don't want to stay. And maybe I'm not doing enough staying at home with my kids. I want my own thing. Right. So there could be people that were envious of you, I think that women do that a lot, unfortunately, is like judging and being envious of each other instead of just supporting each other. So it's like you're doing it wrong if you're working full time. You're doing it wrong if you're working half time. You're doing it wrong if you're staying home with your kids full time. You should be working. You're in that. It's never good. It's never good enough thing.
That concept that you just said that other women could have been looking at me, that never crossed my mind.
Right. Of course.
The only thing I thought that they were thinking was, oh, look at her. She's going to work. Like, what kind of mom is she?
Yeah. And
made me feel worse than them.
There might have been women saying those things to themselves, but it sounds like a lot of it was self-generated.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah, we all have done it. I've done it.
Yes. Of course. So in closing, for any woman that's on here listening, what would be one piece of advice that you would offer someone who's saying, yeah, that sounds just like me? What would you tell them?
I would say look for opportunities to have compassion for yourself. Notice where you're not, where maybe you could feel the criticism or someone says something negative and you go, yeah, I'm an idiot or whatever. People do this all the time, right? Oh, I'm such an idiot. I'm stupid. I messed that up. It's, women do that all the time. Notice it and then go, okay, how can I be compassionate with myself right now? And it could be, I'm just going to close my eyes and take a breath and just slow down my system. That's compassion. It could be, I'm going to take a walk, or I'm going to go in the backyard and touch a tree, or I'm just going to feel what I'm feeling without trying to distract myself from it so that I can process my feeling. So I can just feel it in my body and process it and maybe have a good cry. That can be a way to have compassion for yourself.
I love that. Now, in your coaching programs, do you do individual coaching only, or do you have like groups?
So starting September 20th, I'm doing a group program called The Season of Freedom. And it's all about how to find freedom in something that you feel trapped in.
Oh.
So it could be the way you do your parenting, or it could be your job or your career or your business. It could be your marriage, whatever it is. So that's a group program that I'm doing. And I do those periodically. This one's brand new. And then I also do individual work.
Okay. And I will put all of the links in the show notes so our listeners could go and check you out and maybe get involved in one of your programs. Your books are available on Amazon, I would assume.
Yep. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, I believe, Goodreads. Yeah.
Okay.
And my site.
I think I want to read that self-compassion book that I'm looking at on your shelf right there. Because
you can get it in a PDF form if you want. So you can just
on Kindle, you mean?
I believe Kindle, yes. On Amazon, there's a Kindle.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Rita, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate this talk. I know that there are listeners out there that this resonates with them. And I hope it puts a little bit of an idea into their heads to say, yes, I am not self-compassionate. I'm compassionate for everybody else that I take care of, my boss, my children, my spouse, my aging parents, whoever else. I need to give a little bit of that to myself. And I believe first to yourself before you give it to anybody else. You agree?
I agree. 100%.
Great. Thank you, Rita. I appreciate it. Okay. We'll talk soon.